Why am I playing this game again? Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil 2 Remake, Hardcore difficulty, Claire 2 scenario, no damage, knife only, S+ walkthrough, and this is the full scenario, and I've managed to shorten it down to less than an hour by removing a lot of unnecessary moments where I'm just going from point A to point B with no enemies in the way. I've trimmed out the Sherry section because that section is just horrible, and other moments like that. And there's a lot to say about the B scenario, and I'd rather call it the B scenario rather than the second run because I just like the way it sounds. Because this scenario is very short compared to the A scenario, only it has a lot more RNG involved. And the RPD area is one of the most frustrating areas ever in the B scenario, because the enemy placements, the introduction of Mr. X at the very beginning of the RPD section, it is something that leads to a lot of bullcrap, and it's all luck-based. You have to get really good RNG with the second run, and that is just what I had to suffer through. And I had saved countless bloopers of me getting screwed by the game during this recording of the scenario, but unfortunately, this is something I need to discuss right now. My footage has been completely corrupted for no reason. The PS5 has fucked me. So, I have no idea why, but for some unknown reason, at an unspecified point between the capture of the video clips and now, the video clips were completely corrupted for no reason. So every time I try to play them in the capture gallery, I instead get this weird square with a lightning bolt through it. And then when I try to edit those particular clips, it says that the video cannot be played, please try again later, and then it gives me an error. And then when I try to put those same clips into Share Factory, it says they don't exist, even though they're already in the capture gallery. And then I had moments where certain clips that I could actually play in the media gallery before they eventually crashed altogether at the very end of the video clip, when I put them into Share Factory and I was trying to edit those video clips, when I got to the very end of those video clips, it would cause Share Factory to crash. So the main gist of it is, my existing video clips have been screwed by an unknown intermittent error on the PS5's part, and I have never encountered anything so severe in all my time as a PlayStation gamer. I've never encountered anything like this on PlayStation 4. The only issues I've ever come across on PlayStation 4 have been moments where I've been recording long sessions of video clips, and the audio would just get messed up, and then there would be all sorts of trims that PlayStation would be doing to account for the fact that I'm recording a very advanced game graphically. That's the only kind of issue I ever came across with the video clips, but this is so much worse. And the chances of me posting a Poor Designs of Resident Evil 2 Remake video series are rendered very slim because of this issue. And in order to get all those video clips back, I'd have to play through the entirety of the scenario again and just go through the game normally and just happen to chance upon these issues. And the chances of me stumbling upon these same issues are highly unlikely. So I don't know what I'm going to do. And another thing that's really annoying about this issue is that it's affected my Resident Evil 7 walkthrough. So the ship area from my Resident Evil 7 walkthrough, it's been completely screwed by the issue. I tried to record new footage of the first half of the ship area from the very beginning up until the end of the flashback sequence, and the video clips work perfectly because I'm recording them after this whole issue happened, but my old footage of the second half is completely screwed. And the last clip I recorded for the second half, every time I put it onto Share Factory and I get to the end of the video clip, it would just crash the entirety of the application. And this has been happening every single time, and the Share Factory must have crashed on me at least 10 times at this point, and I've just reported error reports to Sony, and I just hope they get it fixed out, because this is just awful. I don't know what happened, but this is just crazy. So that is the main gist of the kind of errors I'm encountering right now on my PS5. And I guess I should be glad that my Claire B run was not entirely screwed by this issue. My whole entire run is intact, so I won't get any crashes on Share Factory when I'm trying to record commentary or when I get to the end of this video. So thank God for that. But let's just get into what's happening right now with the B scenario. So for this initial introduction to the B scenario, the only part that's really annoying is that very beginning with all the zombies cluttered together. You have to hope that they set up in good positions so that you can get past them and you can stealth past them, because if they aren't in a good position, you have to alert them and use the safe room to your advantage to get them to move out of the way. And even when you're in the safe room, they can still move, so you can use the safe room to manipulate their pathing so that they will get out of the way. And that will allow you to get past them, and then everything I've shown so far you can easily replicate. But this is where the RNG begins, because Mr. X is introduced very early in the RPD section. I'm going to use the sprint counter against him, or some variation of the sprint counter, where I walk towards him, and it triggers him to attack early. So there is a walking counter in this game, because apparently on the initial frames of you walking, the enemies are very sensitive to the change, so they attack very early. But it's all highly dependent upon how the enemy is moving towards you. And because Mr. X doesn't do any kind of weird motion when he's moving forward, he's just like perfectly still as if he has a stick going up his back, the sprint counter works successfully against him. Against zombies, however, because the pathing on the zombies is so bad, it's hard to straighten yourself out so that you're walking directly into the zombie, and I find that at times the zombies seem to be a lot more sensitive when you're walking towards their left side of their body. So that's the best way to ensure that they respond to the walk counter. And this one right here, when you pick up the detonator and you use it on this barricade, you need to take this path right here to ensure that this zombie doesn't get out from the ceiling, and also you need to get lucky with the bookshelf falling over to stop Mr. X from getting into this room, because if the bookshelf doesn't fall over and Mr. X stops it from falling, he's going to ambush you, and he's just going to linger in this room for way longer than necessary, as if he still knows where you are, which only complements his omniscient nature. And because I got very lucky, he's not going to bother me, and even if he is in this room, I can always use the walk counter against him and just get past him. But be very careful when you do decide to use the walk counter or the sprint counter, because of how loose the movement is on this game when it comes to utilizing the sprint counter specifically. It's very hard to adjust yourself so that you can run past Mr. X, and when you have your flashlight out and you're doing a knife-only run, it takes so long for the character to pull out their knife, so you're at the risk of very loose movement when getting past Mr. X. And also, the cammed animation that he does where he grabs you, it has a lot of phantom range to it, actually, so you need to really give Mr. X the widest berth possible to ensure he doesn't grab you with phantom range and just throw you away. And if he grabs you, it will do chip damage to you. Your health will go from dark green to olive green, and that is the indication that you've taken damage. Ooh, also, this room right here, this is so annoying. So there are two zombies in this room. Where they are when you initially enter this room is completely random, but you have to hope that that Asian zombie over there is right near the way into that room, so that when you are interacting with this puzzle right here, you have a clear shot to get down one of the stairs, and Marvin is not going to be so much of a problem. If he is not in that spot initially, you'll want to try to get one of the zombies over near that door that you used the fuse on, so that you are able to set them up in a position where they are most likely not going to screw you over with their random placement. And I've successfully gotten past them, and now we're fighting G1 Birkin, which is one of the worst bosses on this game, but he's a boss that goes down very quickly with the knife, so long as you understand exactly what you're doing. So start knifing him, and then when he starts transforming, get behind him. You want to stand right over here so that you can bait him to do the grab. And the grab has some really bad detection. I got grabbed several times after he completed the animation, and I also got grabbed with phantom range. And once again, I would like to show this issue, but I can't because of the issue I got with PS5. And when he goes down, keep knifing him, try to make sure your knife doesn't break, and you need to stand right in front of him so that you are able to counter his grab. He will always do the grab. Now, while he's stunned, you need to knock him over again because the knife does so much damage to him. Stay in front of him and make sure that he is perfectly parallel to the floor so that you are able to set him up to do this, where he's going to have a lot of trouble turning around, and when he has trouble turning around, it allows you to use a sprint counter against him. And don't try to start knifing him after using the sprint counter for the first time. You'll want to attack him when he decides to do the grab, because whenever I'm trying to get behind him after he does the grab, he never tries to do a second grab. Every time I try to do it after he does another animation, he always does the grab. It's just some clever pathing that you gotta do on him in order to ensure that he doesn't do the second grab. Because if he does the second grab, you will lose both of your knives and you won't be able to kill him. But using that clever manipulation of his AI, I'm able to get rid of him. And like I said before, I don't like that boss, even though he goes down very quickly. It's just a fight that is so clunky in its design that it can't possibly be designed for knife only. It's like they're expecting you to exploit the holes in his AI in order to understand how to do him knife only, and I just think being that overly technical is not the kind of design you want to favor when it comes to designing a game for a specific restriction. And Capcom even confirmed that this game is designed for knife only, which it is designed for knife only in certain scenarios, but there are parts of the B scenario that I just feel like you have to get so lucky if you want to complement a knife-only run. It's almost a very similar case with the original version of Resident Evil 3. You have to get very lucky that the enemy placements are correct and that you get really good RNG on certain sections to ensure that the knife-only requirement is actually possible. Now, this room right here works consistently, although I did have one moment where for some reason, the licker that ran away from me to set up on that wall, it came down from the wall and started to attack me. So there can be a rare moment where that can happen, and it's just one of the frustrating parts about this game. There's no consistency sometimes to what the enemies choose to do, and you get a consistent mechanic or a consistent flinch on an enemy after so many hits, and then there's another situation where it just doesn't work. You just can't trust anything in this game at all because of just how clunky it is and just how unpolished it is. I mean, I'm not going to give the licker such a hard time because it was only one time that it actually happened. So I'm just going to let him off. But every other moment where I just get a lack of consistency, it happens so frequently on this game that it's really annoying. And I know someone's going to make the argument of, oh, just use all the weapons and you won't have to encounter any of these issues. Well, when Capcom markets this game as being designed for knife-only, and they mention it several times, then, therefore, doing a knife-only is the baseline way to play. It's to actually play the game in a way that doesn't feel like New Game Plus. If you're using all the weapons, then you are seriously overpowered in this game, and it's like you're playing New Game Plus. And you are really demonstrating that you are not trying to go out of your way to understand the game at the correct level. Doing this game knife only, you're playing the game as the way it was intended, and you're seeing all of the flaws, and when such flaws are apparent in the intended design for a game, then that is where a lot of the judgments have to be. You can't judge this game based on New Game Plus. You have to judge it based on New Game, and doing this game knife only, this is New Game. This is not New Game Plus. It's the same case for Resident Evil 1 Remake. You play that game knife only, you were playing it at the baseline level, the way the devs actually intended. And this is further proven by the fact that there's a trophy in Resident Evil 1 Remake where you have to beat the entire game knife only without using the lighter fuel, without using defense items, and without using the stomp. And I'm just amazed that they would favor something like that because the gameplay for Resident Evil 1 Remake really falls apart when you're trying to do those restrictions, and I should know because I did a walkthrough of Chris's campaign and Jill's campaign on Real Survival Mode using those restrictions alongside the no audio restriction. And it was just such a boring experience, and it really made an underwhelming game even more underwhelming. And that's just how I would describe Resident Evil 1 Remake and Resident Evil 2 Remake. Underwhelming. They both occupy last place in my overall ranking of the series. And I honestly feel like Resident Evil 2 Remake should be further down the list because the developers had every opportunity available to them to truly make a very ambitious Resident Evil game that actually embraces the proper mentalities with how to make a Resident Evil game, but they just settled on the older model. And that complete dismissal of all the opportunities available for them, I just feel like that is something that really causes Resident Evil 2 Remake to be further down the list. But at the same time, because this game has almost the exact same mentalities as Resident Evil 1 Remake with its enemy designs, with its enemy diversity, with other designs apparent with the characters that are just leading to very inferior gameplay, that's why I would give them both the last place position. And I made mention of this in my Resident Evil 1 Remake walkthrough, and I think it just has to be said. And furthermore, with Resident Evil 2 Remake, I talked about this in my Claire A scenario run, but the scenarios that Resident Evil 2 Remake embraces feel very similar to each other. At least in the original version of Resident Evil 2, the scenarios had a lot more differentiation between them. Like, for instance, with the bosses, you go to one area in the A scenario, you are fighting a completely different boss compared to the B scenario. But for some reason, with the B scenario design in this game, they don't really favor such options. Like, you're fighting G1 Birkin in the exact same area. You're fighting G2 Birkin, G3 Birkin, and the other bosses in the same areas. And it's just impossible to establish the proper chronology of events, and just on a gameplay side, it's just very repetitive. And the minute changes that they've given to the sections just don't feel enough to really help the second run feel different from the first run. And I think that's something that IGN pointed out, which it's one of the few statements that I can actually agree with when it comes to IGN's critique of a game, because IGN is just a very bad service when it comes to judging games. It's the same case with GameSpot and others like that, because the people playing those games don't exactly play them at a level that is worthy of judgment, because I play my games on the hardest difficulty, and the hardest difficulty showcases the developer's true mindset. Ooh, be careful right here. This is really stupid. This showcases an issue with Resident Evil 2 Remake. I mean, I wasn't able to get it on this recording, but there is a high possibility that one of the zombies in this room will be right behind this door. I got grabbed by Marvin when I was going through this door, and once again, I would like to show the issue, but I can't because PS5 decided to screw me. And it's designs like that that really make me wonder why the developers consider hardcore difficulty properly designed. They made mention of this in several videos going over the development process of Resident Evil 2 Remake. But why on earth would they QA test this game and consider this proper? And I think the main reason for that is because they played it on the easier difficulties. And that's just the thing you don't want to do when it comes to designing games. You always want to design your games with the hardest difficulty in mind, because the hardest difficulty showcase the developer's true mindsets, and they further highlight the flaws in a game. And when such flaws are heavily apparent in a game like this, when you're playing it on the hardest difficulty, it just makes you wonder why they put it in there. And it's not even a bug. You can't consider this kind of design a bug. It's just a flaw with the intended designs that the developer decides to put in. So when you're having to adjust your strategies for faults in a developer's designs, that's really where a line is crossed. And this right here is really annoying, and it once again showcases another design that I don't like, and it is Mr. X. And Mr. X is such an omniscient AI who just happens to appear everywhere you go, and he also has the ability to move very fast. If you look behind you while you're running away from him, he moves so fast, and when he's off camera, he's even worse, because apparently he moves at like light speed when he's off camera. And I know this because somebody showed a video of this happening, and I had several moments where this seemed to be the case. Like, during my initial run through this room, I had moments where Mr. X would walk away. I would be trying to get this zombie into the room, and when Mr. X was taking the long way back to this room, he seemed to come in almost a minute, and this is further proof that he has the ability to move very fast when he's off camera. And also right here, how does he know where I am? When he does that door opening animation, it means he knows where you are. There is no way he could spot me. He was nowhere in my sight, and yet somehow he just knew where I was. And if this happens, the second time you're in this area, you need to use this door to your advantage. And this is another issue that I have with this game. Resident Evil 7 had the ability to peek when you were opening doors, so you could open the door slightly and check behind. But on this game, you can't do that, and you run the risk of getting grabbed by Mr. X when he uses his cammed animation to grab you, because of how crap his hitboxes are. And furthermore, he can probably punch you through the door. So the lack of peeking really is restrictive in the long run, and it makes checking your surroundings a lot harder to do. And I know you could be saying, oh, I could be using the audio, and that is true, but at the same time, I should still be able to know where he's going, because the audio at times can be very dishonest. And Mr. X is very good at taking advantage of this fault on the audio design in order to sneak up on you. Jack Baker, on the other hand, Jack Baker actually adheres to the laws of sound, because you could use the sound to pinpoint his position when you were trying to sneak through the main house. And I showcased that in my walkthrough. I mean, you don't have to go through the main house. You can just use the Scorpion key and just go into that room where Jack can't follow you. But I chose to take an alternative route, and I was able to use the stealth to my advantage and also the audio to my advantage in order to sneak past him. And it was so useful. But then they just abandoned that in Resident Evil 2 Remake. And as long as you're getting good RNG with Mr. X, he's not going to be so much of an issue. And I'm at least getting good RNG right here, where he's not coming through the door and he didn't hear me through the bookshelf. However, this female zombie that I was trying to trap in that room, she is coming through this door. So apparently on the second run, she is not restricted by the door. So you can't just go through two doors to stop this zombie from getting through. Even if you go through two doors, she's still going to come out of that room and just know where you are. And that's another thing as well. How the heck does she still know where I am when I went through two doors? There is no way she should have been able to locate me. You know, there are a lot of really bad designs with the zombies on this game. And I've even had moments where the zombies have been able to gain super speed on staircases. Or, I'm sorry, not super speed, that's too much of an exaggeration, but they've been able to maintain their normal walking speed on staircases. And I saved many clips of that, but I can't show you that anymore. But why can the zombies do that? Why do the zombies have the ability to maintain their normal walking speed randomly whenever they're trying to transition onto staircases? It's so unfair because your character has to check where they're stepping and they move at a slower speed. And if you're in a room where you're holding your flashlight out, if you're doing a knife-only run, you're going to struggle so much with staircases on this game, and the enemies are going to have an unfair advantage. If you're using your gun, however, and you're using the aim function, you won't deal with that particular problem. Which also begs the question, why is that an issue? Why is it that when you have your gun out and you're aiming, you just aim it instantly, yet with the sub-weapons, the character has to pull it out of their pocket in order to actually use them? It's stuff like that that, again, is so questionable, and I don't know why this is acceptable. And when you're marketing this game knife only, as I've already explained, why do you allow such designs to pass? It's so dumb, and this is another really dumb section right here. When you are checking to see where Mr. X is, if he is not on this floor, you'll want to take this path. However, the two zombies in the next room can actually hear you while you're sprinting through the walls, so that's why I'm walking right here. I don't know why there are certain moments on this game where the enemies can hear you through walls. It's not the case with every single wall on this game, but for some reason it's an exception in this case. So, you'll notice that the zombies aren't here because I was walking. If you are running and you open that door, they will be able to cut you off. It is so bullcrap. But I was at least able to get past it, and now I'm going to be able to do the Sherry section, which I've completely trimmed out because a toddler could easily do an interactive cutscene moment with Chief Irons. Like, this section has no place in this campaign at all. It should have been an optional section, just like with the Marguerite encounter in Resident Evil 7, where you play the Mia videotape, and it's a videotape, so you have the ability to use it whenever you want to, so it perfectly complemented first-time players, but on repeat playthroughs, you didn't want to go through that sequence again because it was just very simple in its designs. And I at least can have respect for the simple designs of that section because I only have to encounter it once. But you're forced to go through that Sherry section every time you want to replay a Claire scenario. Why? Why did this B team, who made Resident Evil 2 Remake, not take a lot of the positives from Resident Evil 7? Why did they force you to go through an interactive cutscene moment with Chief Irons where you're doing absolutely nothing, and he always does the same thing regardless of what scenario you're on? It makes no sense at all. That should have been a completely optional encounter. And furthermore, the overall designs of Resident Evil 2 Remake are designed for speedrunning. Speedrunning is the main purpose of this game, and Capcom confirmed this because they said they wanted the remake of Resident Evil 2 to respect the original version of Resident Evil 2. So the speedrunning aspect is maintained in this game. But when you're putting in such a section like that, that just causes you to wait for such a long time when you're doing absolutely nothing, how does that benefit the speedrunning? When the main premise of this game is to be a game built for speedrunning, it diminishes the purpose of the Sherry section, and that is another reason why I do not like that section and why it is not graceful in its placement. So, that is why I trimmed out that whole entire section, because anyone can do that section, and it just serves no purpose. You don't need any help with that, and if you need help with that, something's seriously wrong with you. It's like with my Final Fight with Jack video on Resident Evil 7. So many people on Madhouse difficulty have so much trouble with the last phase of Jack, yet he only does 2 attacks in the last phase. 2 attacks. That's right. Is it really that hard to dodge 2 attacks? All you need to do to dodge Jack's attacks is just to move to the correct side of the arena so that he doesn't hit you. But one guy had commented that apparently moving side to side was so difficult for him, and he recommended just standing near the door, but I tried it out for myself, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And that guy is just completely lying, and he's just trying to act like he's the better gamer than me. And there was another guy who needed to use a cheat engine in order to actually figure out exactly what I was doing for the final phase. And that right there is just overkill. To figure out a very simple phase. What an idiot. I don't know who that guy is, but I'm not even going to mention his name. And that right there was very unfortunate. I messed up my sprint counter against the zombie, so I was forced out of the bus, and this gave the dog the opportunity to grab me, so I had to waste my knife. Not that it matters, because as long as I have the one knife that I have, I'll have plenty of knives for the sewers and the laboratory section. And then I came very close to getting grabbed by that zombie, but at least the invisible barrier stopped him from fully grabbing me. And I've just skipped on ahead to this part because that whole moment where you're just traversing the sewers, there's not any threat up until you get to that point, and running past those zombies is easy. So now I'm just going to grab the T-bar handle, and then I'm going to make my save here, because the sewers area is one of the most random parts of the game, and it's all because of the G-Adult room. But the good news, however, is that I did find a consistent strategy to actually get through the G-Adult room on the very first entry. But backtracking through that room is still very random because of what the G-Adults can choose to do. And it's still very bullcrap to this day. But I'll explain it when I get to the G-Adult room. So now for this very weird part, I mean, this is exactly the same as in my Claire A run, but you have to get the zombie to get up the stairs, and then you're supposed to leave the room and then come back in when he gives you his back, because when you leave the room, his AI turns off for a little bit. But when you re-enter the room, his AI, if you re-enter the room too quickly, he will attack you, but if you wait a little bit longer, he doesn't attack you immediately. It's like he has trouble initiating his turning animation when he's on the stairs. Or it's probably just the game being the game. I don't know if this is very consistent, but I have so much trouble running past this zombie at times because of just how odd this section is. And like I said, if they're saying this game is designed for knife only, then this must be the intended way to get past it, because there's no way to get past this section in a way that doesn't require any technical ability. Because you have to be so overly technical in your approach, and how is anyone going to have the idea of leaving the room and then turning off this guy's AI? How is anyone supposed to know that? Like, why do we have to use a strategy that makes it seem like we're actually playing a game? Like, we have to treat this as if it is a game, rather than using some kind of logical strategy. Like I said, I don't like that kind of technical design. If it's a technical design that actually makes sense, like a hidden mechanic or a hidden design, then it actually makes sense why it would be part of the strategy. Ooh, that right there, that is some very rare footage of a zombie actually tripping over another zombie. I remember I had a moment in one of my earlier playthroughs where I was able to get this consistent method of knocking over the zombies by using dead bodies, where on the second grab that the enemies do on hardcore difficulty, if they ran over a body during that moment, they would fall over. And I managed to do this 5 times, and then I tried to repeat the exact same strategy, and then it just stopped working. I hate how a lot of the unique mechanics of Resident Evil 2 Remake that feel Resident Evil-esque are all just tied to percentages. Like, why can't it just be like the old games where it's consistent, where you can actually rely on this mechanic in very dangerous situations? Imagine being able to strategize with being able to use dead bodies as traps for the enemies in order to knock them over. It's the same with Mr. X. If Mr. X could actually kill zombies, imagine the kind of cool strategies that you could do in actually balancing out this game and to actually deal with the enemies. And Seraphim17's recommendation for having Mr. X just gain a lot of speed and a lot of damage on his attacks after he kills a zombie makes perfect sense. And I think that's a little risk versus reward system. And risk versus reward is a concept that has been prevalent in a lot of the Resident Evil games, but this game just doesn't have it. There's just zero reward for taking any kind of risk. I mean, aside from that moment where I thought originally that it was impossible to get that knife as Claire, but I actually discovered that that first zombie who's on the left, just around that corner, he doesn't respond to you very quickly, and if you run exactly like how I do it, he will never be able to grab you, and you can just circle around him. And then for the second zombie, if you hug the left-hand side while you're sprinting, you will make noise, and you will force him to go to the left. And if you move at the right moment, you'll be able to get down, and you'll be able to grab the knife. It is very good. When you're re-entering this area, however, there is a bit of RNG involved with what this particular zombie right here is going to do, because that's a zombie that actually busts through the door in order to ambush you when you're trying to pick up the plug. If he is looking at you, you need to backtrack into the room and then circle around the table and then pick up the plug, then get him to bash down the door and get past him while he's in the recovery frames of the animation. And that's another inconsistent design as well. For some reason, it's inconsistent as to how long it takes a zombie to bust down a door. And because of this, if there are any other zombies in the area and they're closing in on you, if the zombie takes forever to break down the door, the chances of you getting screwed by the other zombies are very high. And that's why when you're re-entering that room, you want to walk so that you don't attract the attention of the other zombies, and you only get the attention of that one zombie if he decides to come after you. And here's some great AI right here. Those guys went into the water very easily, but I swear to God, guys, those two zombies have so much trouble getting into the water, and when you turn zombies into crawlers and they fall into the water, they die instantly. But those guys have so much trouble initiating the animation where they're supposed to fall down, and I find that it's a lot more consistent if you get them to drop down on the left side, because that just seems to be where the detection is actually better. And you'll want to get rid of those two zombies so that they don't get in your way when you're backtracking back to the safe room. And not for the first entry into the Geodolf room, so this guy will always attack when you get close. Hug the right-hand side to get past his grab. And this guy is in a stealth profile, and he's actually in a scripted animation, but if you move at just the right moment into the correct threshold of the room, when he turns and he is aware of you, you're already past him, so when he makes his turn and he's facing in your direction, if he immediately transitions into a combat status, he won't have enough time to grab you, so it gives you plenty of time to run past him. I mean, I don't know if that's the best explanation to give, but that's just what I've been able to rationalize from that. And you might be wondering why I didn't take damage from that zombie just then. Well, if you use the knockback animation that can be triggered when that Geodolf rises out of the ground, if you are knocked backwards and the zombie grabs you from behind, you will get iframes. However, if the zombie grabs you from in front, because the animation takes so long to initiate the moment where he bites you, the iframes will have run out, and you will take damage. So you have to ensure that that zombie grabs you from behind, and you will not take damage. And I even go into the inventory to verify that I haven't taken any damage, and my health is still in the dark green area. As long as your health is dark green, it means you have not taken any damage. When it goes olive green, it means you have taken chip damage. And always make sure you take off that zombie's leg, because on the B scenario, he's active. On the A scenario, he isn't. And he's not going to be a problem when I'm using the plugs and I'm just getting out of this room. And now that we have the plugs, we now have to do the most RNG heavy part of the sewers area, and it's backtracking through that whole entire area, because there's no telling what the G-adults will do. And there's no telling what that zombie is going to do, because at times the zombie can choose to go to the left, or he can just choose to come after you. And if the G-adults are closing in on you, waiting for them to drop down into the water is very hard to do, because there is a high possibility that the zombie will be able to get up and you'll be forced to drop down so that it doesn't initiate a grab animation. But that G-adult is submerging right now, but he's always going to be in that spot. He stays in that area in order to ambush you, so I'm trying to trigger him, and he's always going to knock you back. There's no way to get him to come out of the water and not get knocked back. And I was very lucky right there that he didn't initiate his grab, because his grab covers some insane range. He is able to cover such a wide angle with that grab. The grab that the G-adults do is one of the worst grabs in the game, because running away from it, if they're very close to you, it's almost impossible to get away from it. And given their wide angle with their grab, you have to exert some extreme caution with that grab. And here is a G-adult right here. Do not go up to that mantle point, because this zombie is active on the B scenario. Instead, just wait for the G-adult to finish his grab, and he can't initiate his knockback animation, because for some reason when he emerges from the water, it doesn't trigger that animation. I think that's mainly due to the fact that he's in a scripted attack. And that is the end of the most RNG heavy part of the sewers area. And be really careful when you're backtracking back here, because there is a zombie that's going to be to your left, and you need to walk. If you start walking from that spot right there, he will not aggro on you. You need to stay on this side of the area, like kind of in the middle of the hallway, because if you're too far to the left, the zombie that's around that corner will grab you. And now for this puzzle here. So the puzzle here is the queen, then you need to put the bishop, then it's the king, and then opposite the king you need to put the knight, and then you need to put the rook, and that will complete the puzzle. I have not played the B scenario in so long, so trying to figure out these puzzles again was a little bit tricky to do. I mean, I could have just watched my live streams again, but I thought that was going to take too much time, so I just decided to solve the puzzle normally. For the laboratory codes, however, I had to search it up, just because I didn't want to waste time trying to figure it out, especially when I'm going for S+. And now we're about to make our way over to G2 Birkin. And G2 Birkin, he's still pretty simple, although I have experienced some very unusual behavior with his AI. Like, when I'm running away from him the very first time, I mentioned before that if you hug the left-hand side, he never ever tries to initiate his attack near the mantle point, but it doesn't work anymore. Every time I'm running on the left-hand side, it doesn't change his behavior. He's always going to run the full distance, and he's just going to attack you at the mantle point. And I even had one moment where I managed to get down the mantle point before G2 Birkin initiated his attack. And because he didn't have to waste time doing a completely pointless attack, he jumped down and he knocked me over, and I took damage from it. So that is the first time that has ever happened to me. And also, when I was doing the spring counter method, where when he's facing diagonally to me, but his head is facing in my direction, he was doing all of these different attacks that I'd never seen before. Like, he was doing a 3-8 combo I'd never seen before. He was doing this grab move, and it's interesting that I was able to trigger such unique behavior that after so long playing this game, I had never seen before. And it all started when I did my PS5 playthrough of this game. So I don't know if the PS5 is somehow able to free up certain moments like that, but that is just very interesting that it happened. So he's over there, so you have to make sure he attacks at that mantle point so that he's very delayed in coming down, because if he is not delayed, he's going to be able to get over to where you are, and there's no chance that you'll be able to dodge him, because that crane is in the way. And I'm just going to do the same method again. I'm going to use the sprint counter against him, and I need to get him into a spot where he is going to do a very lengthy animation, and I'm going to hit the button, and it's going to trigger him to do the running grab, where I can easily run past him, and as long as I get him in the path of the crane, he will not have enough time to grab me with a second grab. And did you also see that 3-8 combo where he did the uppercut and then he also did the other two hits? That's the first time I've ever seen that combo. That was one of the new moves he did against me. So after he gets hit by the crane, get behind him. He's going to always do this, and then you need to stand right here in order to influence his pathing so that he's not going to close in on you so quickly. And I'm going to repeat the same method again. The jump attack is the most dangerous attack he has because it comes out so fast and it's just so unexpected that you're going to get hit most likely. So that's why you'll need to use the aiming to your advantage in order to center yourself and not get screwed by the loose movement. You see that? I use the aiming to save myself from that jump attack. That move is the most dangerous move he has. And you see right here, he's facing diagonally, but his head is facing in my direction, so he's doing all of these different moves, and I managed to put him into a lengthy animation just then, although I didn't hit the button at the right moment, because he recovered from the animation before I had actually pressed the button. If you can press the button during the recovery frames of the animation, he will always do the grab. And I'm going to repeat the process again. He's going to do the back attack when I'm behind him. I'm going to stand right here, and he's going to be a little bit faster in the third phase, but the sprint counter is going to help with that. He's doing the grab. If you're directly in front of him, he will do the 5-hit combo. The 5-hit combo is impossible to avoid if you're very close to him, because there is no way to run past him, and that right there was very lucky. I was able to make him repeatedly do the grab, and I managed to find an opportunity to hit the button, but once again, I hit it at the wrong moment because he got out of his recovery frames, because I thought I could actually hit the button before he got out of those recovery frames, because he doesn't have a lot of recovery frames during that grab, but it didn't work in the end, but I was still able to pull it off. And because of the fact that I have placed my saves in these spots, I'm going to have one additional save for the laboratory area compared to what I did previously for my A scenario runs of Claire A and Leon A, where my last save was at the beginning of the laboratory area, so I had to do an entire 30-minute section of gameplay without any kind of ink ribbon to make up for that, because if I had used an ink ribbon, I would have avoided my S+ requirement, but with the way I place my saves now, getting S+ is going to be a lot easier, and I won't have to do a 30-minute section of gameplay, and it's really good, because doing bosses like G3 Birkin knife only, G3 Birkin is so boring, and he takes such a long time to deal with, but because I have as many knives as I do, I'm going to have a lot more liberties at my disposal with not having to hit his weak spots only. I can hit his entire body if I want to. I mean, I'm still going to mainly prioritize the weak spots because they do the most damage to him. And you need 2 knives for G4 Birkin, so making sure that you save at least 2 knives, or I'm sorry, not 2 knives, you need to save 1 knife at the end of G3 Birkin, and then you can pick up an additional knife to deal with G4 Birkin. That is definitely one of the liberties given to me because I save my knives correctly. Now we're dealing with the IVs. Just like what I did previously in my A scenario run, I'm going to incapacitate this IV, but instead of being in front of him, I'm going to get behind him, because his active frame period is a little delayed with that grab, because his grab takes a little bit longer to prep when you're behind him. And now I'm just going to put in the codes. At least the zombies and the lickers in that one room where you need to use the signal modulator aren't going to be so much of a problem because I picked up the signal modulator early, so I'm not going to have to backtrack through that room and run the gamut with those zombies. So I kind of wish that the A scenario embraced a very similar system where you could get the signal modulator early, because I think the laboratory area flows a lot better when you have the signal modulator early. Having to backtrack through that area and running the gamut with RNG heavy zombies that are really poorly designed, and then having your movement gimped by those lickers that are just high on drugs because they run at light speed when they're trying to close in on you, and they have some pretty bad hitboxes. You know, that to me just screams a really bad design. And I'm really glad that the B scenario doesn't embrace this kind of design. And now I just need to make my way past this IV, and the IVs are probably my least favorite enemy in the game because they don't respond to the sprint counter, and because of the fact that they don't really straighten themselves out when they're making their way towards you, it's very hard to judge when they're going to attack, and they have so much range on their attacks, and they attack so fast that you don't have enough time to run away from them. And also, when you're able to run past them successfully, even if you run past them successfully, they get so much range on their back grabs that you have almost like a 30% chance of getting away. So I think the best way to deal with the IVs when you're trying to run past them is to bait out the first grab, then use your knife to stun them, and then that's your opportunity to run past them, because there is no way you're going to be able to challenge that long range grab that they do when you're behind them. But I'm just going to use the signal modulator here, and I'm just going to grab this last knife before G3 Birkin, and I will not have to return to this room ever again. And this is really great for the flow of this level. And now that I have the knife, I'm just going to make my way over to the cooling room so I can cool the herbicide. And right over here, you need to stop and you need to start walking. Because if you're running and you get past that threshold, the lickers that spawn from the ceiling will know exactly where you are, even when you resume walking. I don't know why this is the case, but it's about as stupid as that moment when you're on the third floor of the RPD building and those zombies can hear you through the wall if you're running. But I got past them, and now I have the herbicide. I'm going to backtrack through this room, and I'm going to make sure I'm still walking. And the lickers aren't above me, they're just right behind me, where all those zombies are. And now I'm in here, and because I turned on the power before I got up these stairs, and Ivy will always spawn. And this is weird, you're going to see this, but watch the distance this guy covers with his first grab when he's on the stairs, and I'm not on the stairs. He initiated his grab from further away compared to normal. Like, that was very interesting understanding that, and then I still get grabbed by him because he covers way too much range with his back grab, and I'm on the stairs, and every single enemy runs faster than you on staircases. I mean, I could have used my knife to actually move a little bit faster by aiming, but even still though, he covers way too much range. He's way faster than me. Every single enemy on this game, when they initiate an attack animation on the stairs, they are always going to move at the exact same speed. Their speed is not impeded whatsoever by the stairs, yet your movement speed is. Just, how is that fair? And then Capcom's all like, oh, this is going to be the most realistic Resident Evil game ever. Well, that's not exactly realistic, where I'm checking where I'm stepping, yet the zombies and the Ivies don't have to do anything like that, and you're just giving them a cheap advantage over me. Like, every single enemy just gets an artificial handicap on this game in order to feign lethality, in order to cheat, and to just make the game a lot less balanced. And Capcom saying this game is well balanced, well, they're just deluding themselves. And when I'm talking about Capcom, I'm always going to say new Capcom, because new Capcom doesn't know what they're talking about. Old Capcom at least knows what they're saying, because they at least know how to balance their games. But I've just picked up the chip, and you always want to make sure that you take out some of the bulbs on those downed Ivies so that they don't get up immediately, and this will give you an opportunity to get past them. Now, this guy right here is very annoying, and because I have my flashlight, I'm not going to be able to run past him effectively, and this is the moment where I just decided to use my knife when he decided to do the first grab, because running past them is impossible, and especially when you have your flashlight out, because you can't pull out your knife fast enough to readjust your movement. As I stated before in my Leon 1 scenario run, the movement on this game is honestly the worst movement system ever because of how loose it is. I get screwed more by the movement on this game than in any other Resident Evil game. And it's not just the movement as well. I get screwed by the inconsistent flinch designs, I get screwed by the limb dismemberment system, I get screwed by so many inconsistent mechanics, and that's just what this game is mechanically, inconsistent. And that's just another reason why I don't use the guns on this game, because the guns just don't offer any sort of way of really balancing the game out, or really offering any kind of different reactions for the enemies. Just going out of your way to pick up the guns just breaks the pacing of the game, and when you're breaking the pacing of the game just doesn't flow correctly. So the weapons just feel superfluous in the long run, and there's never any incentive to pick them up. They just feel like a spot that just occupies your inventory, because the game is just designed around knife only, so the enemy types just don't demand anything. And if you're going out of your way to pick up the weapons, you're just giving the game way more credit than it deserves. And I know a lot of people consider knife only to be the most impressive thing ever, but after playing so many Resident Evil games, and after playing this game, like, knife only serves as a crutch to hold back the true potential of a game, because if a game is designed for knife only, then most likely the enemies, the environments, everything else is just going to suffer in the end, and the game is just going to lack any kind of challenge and any kind of complexity. And that lack of complexity really takes away from the survival horror feeling of the game, and this game feels like a cheap action game, just like Resident Evil 1 Remake. You're just running around with one weapon only, not caring about ammunition. And a lot of people believe the older Resident Evil designs and mentalities complement ammo management, but that couldn't be more further from the truth. Have you seen any moment in this walkthrough, or even in the older Resident Evil games, where I've gone out of my way to pick up ammunition? No. Have you seen moments in the newer Resident Evil games where I picked up ammunition? Yes, because those games are more complex, more demanding, and offer a lot more incentive to pick up ammunition. So this is really an argument that has already reached a solution. And having established one of the reasons for not liking this game, other reasons not related to mechanics include the lack of character interactions, because Leon and Claire barely interact with one another, and it's the same between Claire and Sherry. And can I just talk about this for a little bit? Capcom related Sherry to Newt from Aliens, and I'm sorry guys, but Newt from Aliens is nothing like Sherry in this game. Newt is actually a properly developed character who actually contributes to the story, and she was one of my favorite characters in Aliens. Aliens is such a great movie, and it's one of the best films ever made. It might even be the greatest survival horror film ever made, in my opinion. Just everything done in that movie was fantastic, and Newt was one of them. And Sherry is nothing like Newt, and I think it's absolutely insulting that Sherry is compared to Newt from Aliens. Like, she is just not properly developed like Newt is. And this just the interaction between Claire and Sherry just not being apparent in Resident Evil 2 Remake. One of the strongest aspects of Aliens was the interaction between Ripley and Newt. So how can you compare Sherry to Newt when her interaction with Claire is so limited compared to Ripley and Newt's relationship? Like, that is just one of the reasons why I don't like this game. And continuing on with my list of reasons as to why I don't like Resident Evil 2 Remake, they include lackluster side character content because Sherry's just avoiding cheap irons in an interactive cutscene, while Ada's just running past a handful of zombies and Mr. X and doing some minor puzzles, and it doesn't diversify the gameplay in a way that's interesting. Lack of interesting environments that are actually utilized properly because they're all remakes of old environments that weren't very interesting then and didn't have a lot of life to them. Lackluster enemy designs and diversity because there's really only 4 enemy types in the game. The zombies and Ivies feel exactly the same. You have lickers, you have dogs, you have G-adults, and they all just feel very lacking in their designs and not very intriguing. You just run past all of them like they're nothing. And then finally, the B scenario ending is a very poor ending because it just completely discredits the beginning of Leon's journey to rid the world of bioterrorism, and also it showcases the beginning of his PTSD. And it also discredits Claire's goal to find Chris. There's no mention of Claire wanting to find Chris in the ending of Resident Evil 2 Remake. The ending instead opts for a goofy, fan service-like ending that doesn't pay its respect to the original game and to Resident Evil as a whole. At least Resident Evil 3 Remake doesn't do the same with its ending, and that game is better in so many aspects. Especially with the fact that it didn't try to include a stupid piece of DLC. Resident Evil 3 Remake had absolutely no DLC, it just had its campaign, which was so much more intricately designed than this campaign. Whereas Resident Evil 2 Remake had that really pathetic piece of DLC content known as the Ghost Survivors DLC, where it's just a reskin of Fort Survivor mode, a mode that already wasn't very interesting because it's just speedrunner territory, just going from point A to point B, not caring about anything. And then you had that Survivor mode, and the Survival mode that they included with that DLC was nowhere near as good as the Night Terror DLC from Resident Evil 7. And they didn't even have any interesting music playing for that sequence, and they didn't have any interesting enemies. All they did was just change the fundamental properties of a zombie just to make different variations of a zombie. You had just the poison zombies, the palehead zombies, the exploding gas tank zombies, and zombies that had backpacks, but that was really it. Nothing else was very intriguing about that mode. And altogether, that is just a nice bow and ribbon of all the reasons why I don't like Resident Evil 2 Remake from a perspective that has nothing to do with the mechanics. And there are a lot more reasons than that, but I think those issues that I've explained represent the main gist of the issues I have with Resident Evil 2 Remake from a non-mechanical perspective. So, overall, Resident Evil 2 Remake is just a very big disappointment for a Resident Evil game, and I'm so glad that Resident Evil Village is not opting for the same design. In fact, something cool just happened with regards to Resident Evil Village. There is actually going to be a gameplay presentation of Resident Evil Village on the 21st, and they showed the teaser, and the teaser for the gameplay presentation was so cool. I was so hyped for the presentation, and some of the new things that they showed in that teaser definitely helped in building up the hype for the presentation. And I'm going to definitely do an analysis video of the teaser when I get the chance, because I've already recorded it, and I have it stored on my USB drive. I just need to put it onto my PS4's share factory, and then I'll be able to do the commentary for it. Because there's just a lot to really take from that teaser. And like I mentioned before in one of my earlier videos on my YouTube channel, the marketing for Resident Evil Village is perfect. I mean, sure, they haven't been very vocal with the kind of things you're doing in Resident Evil Village or with the other aspects of Resident Evil Village, but I think that's all there to build anticipation. Whereas the marketing for Resident Evil 2 Remake, it's like they were trying to tell a bunch of 9-year-olds that yes, you're playing a survival horror game, yes, you're playing an older Resident Evil game, but like, did they have to be so literal in their explanation, and did they have to be so literal with taking scenes from the game that would properly convey this? Like with Leon being like, it's coming back! Like, that is just so cringy. And I just walked away from those trailers feeling like I'd been belittled, and it just felt so patronizing the way they set up those trailers, but I haven't felt anything like that with Resident Evil Village's trailers. And I know I should be explaining what I'm doing with G3 Birkin right now, but I'm already on the third phase because G3 Birkin is so simple. If you need a detailed explanation as to how to fight G3 Birkin, check out my A scenario run of Claire and Leon. And because I have more knives for this fight, I was able to beat this fight in about 9 minutes compared to 15 minutes of just boredom in my Claire A run. And Leon can actually knife this guy a lot more than Claire, because all Leon needs is one knife to deal with Final Tyrant, and after you kill G3 Birkin, or rather you incapacitate G3 Birkin as Leon, you get one knife before Final Tyrant. So you are free to use as many knives as you want against G3 Birkin when you're playing as Leon. With Claire, you don't want to be too rampant with your knives, because of course Claire needs to have 2 knives before G4 Birkin, because 2 knives are the only way to kill G4 Birkin. And I have plenty of knives to deal with G4 Birkin. And you will get 1 knife before G5 Birkin, so that isn't an issue whatsoever. But I'm going to speed this section up because the Ivies are so delayed in getting up off the ground that you have plenty of time to get past them. And now for this sequence, which is very random because there's no telling what these 2 Ivies will do. But all I'm going to do right here is I'm just going to hide up here because the Ivies cannot climb ladders, and because I have plenty of knives for G4 Birkin, I will gladly use 1 knife against the Ivies in this part. But the Ivies gave me really good RNG on this section, so I was able to save my knife. And all that's left to deal with now, before G4 Birkin, is just 1 zombie that's on fire. But I don't know why they have to put him here, because he just dies out so quickly. I mean, I still try to use the sprint counter against him, because I like to be very fast in this part. But I'm past him, and now I'm just going to put the plugs in, and now begins the fight with G4 Birkin. So G4 Birkin is not a damage-based fight. It's based on the amount of eyeballs that you need to get rid of. So you need to use the knife against him, obviously, and there are people who even recommend that you use grenades and the knife in order to deal with G4 Birkin. Guns just don't cut it, because they just aren't very reliable in getting rid of all the eyeballs, whereas the knife can get rid of multiple eyeballs, and it's the same with the grenades. So every time G4 Birkin drops down from the train, he's always going to do this move right here, and then he's always going to follow that up with a charge attack. So move to the side, and then knife him once. Then what you're going to have to do is you need to get behind him, and this will force him to do a back attack, and you will not have to deal with any frontal attack, because there is one frontal attack that he can do that has a lot of range, and if you're caught, he will do damage to you. And now you just need to wait for him to do 2 attacks, either his running attack or his charge attack. And if he is just being inactive for a very long time, it means he's going to do his charge attack right here. So once again, get to the side, knife him once, and then run away. And most likely he is going to retreat onto the wall, which he is doing right now. And every odd time he decides to climb the wall, he's always going to jump onto the train, and then every even time he's always going to try to jump on top of you. But he jumps on the train, and you'll want to stand right around here and then move to the right at just the right moment, and you will be able to avoid the attack, and you can punish him during his recovery. Now I'm just going to repeat the process. So since he jumped down, I know he's going to do the flail attack, and after this attack he's always going to do the charge attack, so I'm just going to run to the side. I'm going to hit him once while he's in recovery, and I'm just going to get behind him so that he does a backhand attack rather than a frontal attack. And I just need to watch what he does. If he gives me a good move, I'm going to be able to punish him, and he does not give me a good move because he's doing a close range attack right now. And it's only his long range attacks that really give him the most recovery compared to his close range attacks. And he's still coming, and he's just going to climb onto the wall. So since this is the even attempt, he is going to try to jump on me, but I'm just going to move out of the way. And at least it's not a typical jump attack that you see normally in games where it just tracks you in midair. This is a Resident Evil jump attack. And it's hard to believe, in Resident Evil 1, the dogs on Resident Evil 1 Remake specifically, they had the ability to turn in midair when they did their jump attack, and they were one of the most bullcrap enemies in the game, and they didn't even flinch from attacks properly. Not even from the shotgun did they flinch properly. They have to be the worst dog enemy ever made in the entire Resident Evil series. Aside from Operation Raccoon City's dogs, but I'm not counting Operation Raccoon City because it's just a spin-off title. Spin-off titles never have the same level of polish as a main game. And that's why I'm not including Operation Raccoon City in that judgment. But seeing as how this whole process of beating G4 Birkin is easy, I'm just going to go on a different tangent. I have been thinking of doing a series where I review each Resident Evil game that is available on the PS4, because I can actually record footage of the Resident Evil games on PS4. I can't do the same with any Resident Evil game on PS3, so the only Resident Evil games I'll only be able to review if I ever decide to do this are Resident Evil 1 Remake, Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, Resident Evil 4, 5, 6, 7, Revelations, and Revelations 2. I'm not going to look at any of the spin-off titles because they don't really count, and they just aren't very good as spin-off titles or even as Resident Evil games. Although if Resident Evil Dead Aim was actually a spin-off title on PS4, I would gladly do a review of that game, because that game is a lot of fun. Considering that it's only 20 minutes, it's definitely a short but sweet experience. And playing through that game on hard difficulty and actually being forced to use the weapons because you have no knife in that game, it's a very different kind of Resident Evil game, and the dodge system on that game is really good. It's so much better than the original Resident Evil 3's dodge. And I just think, overall, it's probably the best spin-off title of a Resident Evil game I've ever played. But going back to my main tangent, I'm thinking of titling the series A True Resident Evil Player's Perspective on ... and then I'd leave it up to the viewer to know which Resident Evil game I'm going to be reviewing, because I'd leave it as a surprise. So at a certain point in the video, I just say the name of the Resident Evil game that I'll be reviewing, and then I actually show the footage, and then I leave my thoughts on it in almost a professional-like manner, while still adding in a little personal touch, just like what Cerebrum17 did with his reviews of Dark Souls 2, The Last Guardian, and also The Surge. Because I really liked the way Cerebrum17 reviewed those games, and I just liked the personal spin he put on the reviews. And I think it's a very inspiring piece of work to see somebody make as great a review as what he's shown, and then just post it to YouTube. That I think that's how it will go if I ever decide to do this series. And I know I was originally going to do like a Resident Evil 7 versus Resident Evil 2 Remake video series, but then I just realized it'd be too much work, and I just think it wouldn't be very easy for me to get my thoughts together. And what if I were to talk about the other Resident Evil games? You know, that's just the main issues I encountered with deciding on whether I should do that, so I just canceled it altogether. But I think it's exciting to review a game series that you absolutely love, because Resident Evil's honestly the greatest series ever made. It actually has ambition. Every Resident Evil game feels different. Every developer is different. Like the director for each of the Resident Evil games is always different, which is why Resident Evil has such a unique taste to it. And that is something that Shinji Mikami pointed out. And based on a lot of these unique factors, Resident Evil is going to be a very interesting series to review if I ever decide to do it. So stay tuned for a potential A True Resident Evil Player's Perspective on ... series in about a year or so, because I think I'll most likely lose the drive to do it, because I'll probably be focused on other things. But I have successfully finished off G4 Birkin. He's going to go into the suicide status, and you just got to wait for him to die out. And then the final boss on this game is just a gimmick fight. You just gotta wait until the right moment to hit him, and it's all pretty simple. And I know a lot of people were complaining about this fight, but realistically it makes a lot more sense than the final boss of the B scenario in the original version of Resident Evil 2, because G5 Birkin could easily crush the player, and he doesn't do it in the original version of Resident Evil 2. He just kind of like sticks around and just backs up, and you have the ability to glitch through his tentacles and just kill him by using the knife, but you can't do that here. If he touches you, he will instantly kill you, and you're on a time limit because you don't have a lot of time before he decides to crush you. And I'm at least glad that they decided to make it very logical with the way he decides to attack you. And before you say, oh, it's really bad that this fight uses a gimmick fight as a final boss fight, look at the amount of Resident Evil games that have had gimmick fights. Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 7. Like, there are a lot of Resident Evil games that have utilized gimmick fights as a final boss fight, and they've most of the time been really good, although Resident Evil 1's final boss fight was really disappointing. And Resident Evil 2 was a little bit more entertaining when you were listening to Final Tyrant's theme, but all he did was just skate around, and it was pretty stupid. And that was the main gimmick of it. And Resident Evil 3 was awesome, Resident Evil 5 was awesome, Resident Evil 7 was awesome. But this final boss fight is pretty boring, and not really that interesting. So that's all I'll leave it to in the end. But this has been my Resident Evil 2 Remake, Hardcore Difficulty, Claire 2 scenario, no damage, knife only, S+, no audio walkthrough. Stay tuned for Leon 2. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.